So the Prime Minister is off to Brazil for a climate change conference very shortly. It was believed he wasn't going to go, but then I think he realised that if he stayed around here, he might have to answer some more questions on China. So he's obviously doing a chicken run and running away hard as you can. His excuse is he needs to bang the drum for climate change, which is very strange, going to a climate change conference to bang the drum. It's a little bit like going down to your local boozer and saying you've got to bang the drum for alcohol consumption. By definition, the people in there are likely to be consuming alcohol or have an interest in it. However, I digress. In terms of within the UK, the climate change net zero agenda is basically dying on its arse. Let's not lie about that. The absolutely fantastical job creation numbers that are being thrown around by the Labour government and Ed Miliband kind of prove that point. Very much trying to demonstrate that, net zero isn't just basically a hair shirt. It's about the next generation. It's about basically, what do they call it? The new economy and all that. Obviously, I mean, when you get into the actual details, that's proven to be utterly nonsense because most of this stuff is not actually built here. It's basically built in China. So net zero is effectively a handing off of our industrial capacity and making us ever more reliant on China, a hostile power. But I mean, this is something that I get frustrated with when I hear them interviewed and they never say that or talk about that. However, going back to the job side of things, what you should always ask, and it's something that, again, I just want to scream at television when I hear interviews that don't say it, is you're talking about creating 400,000 green jobs, of which there was something in the newspaper said they were talking about classifying plumbers and electricians as green jobs, obviously just to make the numbers up. I don't know if that's true or not. But if you're going to create X amount of green jobs, how many of the other ones are you going to destroy? Because that's the bit that no one talks about, and it's something that I've discussed in my Substack before. In capitalism, there's a thing called creative destruction. That is, old jobs go away, old companies go away, new ones are created, the system renews, innovation, and so much more. You've seen this certainly in, say, my 45 years of life. I know travel agents used to be everywhere, now they're hardly anywhere. Why is that? Because they were creatively destroyed by the internet. Well, if you look at what we're actually losing, it's not that we're destroying things that and being replaced by even better industries. We're just destroying industries we need. Oil refineries we will need for decades to come. Steel factories, we're still going to need steel or steel mills. Our petrochemical industry, again, we still need these chemicals, whether people like it or not. So the creative destruction that's being wrought upon the industry, upon this country, is not so much creative destruction, that it's destroying something to create something new. It's wanton destruction by the political class who have and are destroying our industrial capacity in order to hit their facile net zero numbers. And it is very much that's going on. There was a newspaper article the other day based on some study which basically showed, I think, pretty much all of our CO2 emission reductions that have happened over the last however many years are down to deindustrialization. Congrats. You've not solved the problem of lower CO2 emissions. What you've done is you've offshored it. So it's actually probably producing more globally, because we're having to use, it's being produced in lower efficiency countries, and then we're using copious amounts of what's called bunker fuel, which is some of the dirtiest fuel you'll use, which is used in ships to ship it here. And along the way, you're destroying working class jobs in rundown, poor areas, and replacing them with what? Supermarket, solar panel laying people. I mean, come on. And the unions know this. And that's why they're starting to scream over it. But the unions are responding because the fact that more and more of their members coming from those areas are just going, you know what? You guys are useless. I'm voting reform. And so, the current leadership, who are a replacement of the older ones, are much more down to earth, and they're realising that basically it is their the whole Labour movement is going to lose the unions, because the unions are a function of the members. So at some stage, you will just get, if enough of them basically start voting reform, or other right-wing parties, national parties, whatever you want to call them, then at some stage the leadership will become like, they will elect people who are like that as well. And I think that at some stage or t'other, or some level or t'other, Labour gets this. But they're stuck because of their own rhetoric, they're stuck because of their own dogma that climate change is going to kill everyone and therefore we must do this whatever happens. Made worse by the fact that their politics are so, their political coalition is so broken now. You have a Labour government or Labour Party which is basically shearing off votes to the left and the right. The extremes of the left who are the eco people, and the the hard left, as it was originally called, are off to places like, what's it, your party, the Greens, and everything else. And then on the right, traditional small c Labour voters based around working conditions and everything else are going over to Reform or other parties there. And that Labour can't win that because the coalition is so broken. There is no way you can square the circle of net zero as it's currently structured with maintaining that electoral coalition, because they are fundamentally incompatible with each other. The same with migration, but that's for another video. So I don't know how long this has to run, but I suspect it's going to be a lot shorter than many think. I think that the pressure now piling up on the government is becoming so extreme on this subject, and I think actually probably the break will come because of this EU negotiation, depending on what happens with it. Because what I don't think the unions and certain union members have realised is the fact that the government wants to sign us up for the carbon adjustment mechanism alongside the EU, which will make imports much, much more expensive, which will push up costs and everything else, but also over carbon pricing. The EU carbon pricing is about, the cost of carbon emissions inside the EU is about twice what we have in the UK. So by the time you roll that out to industry, it's going to kill off what little heavy industry we've got left over. And then on top of that, the EU is extending their carbon pricing to domestic fuels, including petrol, the gas that goes inside your house, and so much more, which is going to make all of those prices move up massively and will destroy what's left of economic growth. And I suspect when that realisation starts trickling in, when people, within the union suddenly grasp exactly what that means for them and their jobs, there's going to be a moment of complete clarity and quite massive conflict. And so, we're rolling towards that. That's probably the moment that I suspect there will be that crisis. I think it's going to come sooner than many think. Probably forerun by the local government results next year, which will basically show Labour getting wiped out across entire sections of this country, not just by Reform, but Plaid Cymru, particularly in Wales, and so much more. But though Plaid is basically a carbon copy of the Progressive mould, so therefore they're going to basically go offer up more of the same. So in due course, they will also go through the same cycle of basically people are just going to go, you're all nutters, we need to get away from you. But that's a side point. So Labour is going to struggle with this. And I think that the longer it goes on, the longer they'll struggle with it. And I think that goes even without that, the general population has largely had enough as well. So I think that we are staggering very quickly towards that crisis for the party. And once that happens, I don't think it actually changes much, because the party is now on such a downward slope. Its electoral coalition, like I said, is structurally broken, and it clearly has no answers to anything. But I think it's another signpost along the way to the fact that Labour, in my opinion, is probably going to settle about 10-12% in the polls now. That doesn't mean at an election they will get 10 to 12, because there is a herding function within the first past the post electoral system. But certainly in the polls, that's what they'll probably end up polling at. Lower than Tories, eaten alive on all flanks by different people, different parties, and really without an ability to actually respond to the fact that net zero is a big reason why they are here, certainly on their traditional voting point, and utterly unable and unwilling to respond to the now very clear calls by reform, yes, but actually kudos to the Tories. They've come out into opposition and very clearly have decided to clean the stables out and come out with a more grown up and thought through position on these things. And they are now basically speaking the truth about what's going on and what it all means. Should they have done it in government? Yes, but we are where we are. And I think that, it just provides more pressure on Labour, because net zero was only really ever possible if you had all parties basically willing to inflict the pain upon the public together, and that's no longer true. So yeah, well, watch this space. I think it's going to be very interesting. I suspect that this trip to Brazil will probably be one of the last that UK politicians or the Prime Minister ever does on this subject, such as the level of public discontent over it. And I suspect that the carbon border plus carbon pricing and everything else with the EU has the capacity to blow things up quite successfully, even more. So we'll see. Thank you. Speak soon.